How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to be discussing how to utilize scientific research and use it in the best of your ability to actually get the practical outcomes that you want. So it is definitely a mistake for you to look at scientific research to form the foundation of your guiding principles behind what you believe is the best way to approach nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, and psychology. And the reason for this is that scientific research in regards to human organisms is just a collection of data and evidence that is best used to formulate more questions and to maybe help bring clarity to why do we get the results that we do in our own trial and error experiences. Most people who assume that scientific research is the kind of collection of facts and proving facts, these people, they don't have an actual college education in science. They don't actually have a formal understanding of science, and that's probably why they make the mistake of misinterpreting the whole purpose of research. And the other reason is probably that there's a lot of dogmatic charlatans who want to give you the idea that they found the absolute truth and the best way to do things, and that they know, based on the research, what's the most scientifically accurate way to navigate a subject. For example, these vegan gurus like Colin Campbell, who insist that red meat is, an animal protein, causes colon cancer, and it's the only cause of cancer, the main cause of cancer, or it drives the growth of cancer, and IGF-1 and all this other stuff. Or else you have, on the other side, you have like the carnivore gurus who insist that plants are toxic because of the research done on, anti-nutrients and oxalates and stuff like that. And then they'll pull up some intervention trials, like, for example, the Bruce Ames study that showed that plants have more naturally occurring pesticides than artificially occurring, even though that research was mostly used to form the foundation of his hormetic nutrient kind of hypothesis or whatever, that Rhonda Patrick is now kind of pioneering. So carnivore gurus take research and completely blow it out of proportion. And the vegan gurus, like the Colin Campbell, if you haven't read the book, The China Study, you need to read it. It's basically exaggerating rat studies where they feed them carcinogens and then they feed them other substances on the side to see what causes the carcinogens to be more potent. And it's just a really weird way of trying to establish like a causal link between animal protein and cancer. And then in his lectures, he insists that there's a causal link based on that research. And then based on the Cornell University, like gigantic population research on China and its correlations between different diseases and how much animal protein they eat. And unfortunately, they cherry pick and they remove a lot of data points that would otherwise have shown the complete opposite of what they concluded. But anyway, this is just like one example of how, if you follow research, it can lead you to extremes that don't actually stack up to practical reality. Like, for example, the carnivore diet one, the best way to show you that that's not entirely true, is that, for one, the majority of the blue zones, the longest living people in the world, they eat a lot of plants, but they also eat a lot of animal protein. That is true. But they eat so much plants that you would think if plants were actually poisonous, it would kill them. We know this due to population data, epidemiology. If plants were actually toxic and poisonous, then the people who eat the most plants would not have the best health outcomes. But, because these people want you to believe that they know the best the best thing, and it's based on scientific research and this and that. They want you to believe that they found causation where causation doesn't exist. They want you to believe they found absolute facts in a field of study that isn't adequate to actually show proof and causation. Only correlations and evidence and data to help us kind of like gather opinions. But people don't want to admit that their declarations and claims are opinions. We don't want to admit that our interpretation of the evidence and data is an interpretation. We want to assume or believe that we can extrapolate objective conclusions from extremely cloudy and murky and intricate and deeply interconnected, complex, millions of data points of evidence. So yeah, that's a big thing. So let's kind of dive deeper into this kind of example I have going on. And just so everyone knows, this video is not specifically about nutrition. It's not about carnivore versus vegan. These are kind of stupid paradigms really anyway, in my opinion. But we're going to use these paradigms anyway so that we can compare and contrast the common assumptions and the way that they use research and things to try to understand how we can increase our own understanding of using scientific research and using anecdotal experiences to produce the results that we actually want. Because at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is how do we get to the health outcomes that we desire? How do we improve our health, reverse diseases, improve our sports performance, improve our relationships and our well-being? How do we improve our lives? And when we focus way too much on scientific accuracy, we get lost in data points, meta-analysis of millions of people and hundreds of different studies combined together. And then we get lost in, well, what even is truly good evidence and what's not? And all these things that don't have anything to do with actually obtaining our goals. Oftentimes, if we just look at what's working in the real world, and then we compare it to the research, we can actually find misunderstandings that the researchers might not have found, and things other people have missed, but also we can usually find a pretty good middle ground of what's actually going on. The problem is that people tend to only pay attention to their anecdotes and assume all research is flawed or paid for, or else people just entirely follow the general consensus of the research. What does my favorite medical doctor believe, or just what the research says? And that can lead us to pretty good results a lot of the time, but we can miss out on certain things that aren't as well understood by the research, like autoimmune disease, Crohn's disease, even heart disease, and stuff like that, and mental health, mental illness, and depression as well. So anyway, let's use this example of plant foods being poisonous, okay? Carnivore people will use the scientific evidence that analyzes these plant foods and finds compounds that could be problematic in high amounts if we do not cook the foods and stuff, that they can be problematic. But when we look at evidence on health outcomes, we find people who eat the most plant foods generally don't suffer from side effects caused by things like phytic acid or anti-nutrients and things. They don't develop nutrient deficiencies provided they have a balanced diet that also includes these plant foods with the anti-nutrients. And the other thing is these carnivore people will say that plant foods are poisonous, but we know that that's not necessarily true because, for one, humans have actually been eating plant foods for most of their evolution, minus maybe the Ice Age. But we know that indigenous tribes that were studied in modern times, where we can actually know for sure what they're eating, that don't show up in carbon isotope tests, by the way. They do eat plant foods and a wide variety of different foods from their environment, and it depends on the population of indigenous people that are being studied. But the problem is that they prepare these foods in a very specific way that you wouldn't otherwise know based on research alone. They kind of like will, with grains, for example, like beans, like a lot of times they'll kind of like put them in a giant bowl and soak them in water for a long time and then step on them and turn them into mush and make congee or something. or absorb them in an acidic medium and soak them in acid so that it breaks down a lot of these anti-nutrients and things. Then they consume them for things like magnesium and minerals, as well as maybe protein and other things. We actually know if you don't prepare them properly and eat them only raw, the phytic acid and other phytase, the pepsin inhibitors and things, and protein inhibitors. What can happen is you can develop psychosis. That's found in populations who literally eat nothing but some of these beans without preparing them and cooking them properly. So yeah, these anti-nutrients can harm you if you don't prepare and cook the plants properly, but they're not actually poisonous, and we know that by what I just said here, and by the research showing people who eat them cooked and prepared properly don't develop nutrient deficiencies and problems that would happen if these anti-nutrients made that big of a deal. And the biggest thing is that people who eat the most fruits and vegetables, for example, the Women's Health Study, the nurses, by the NIH, and what else? The Pure Study. Like, there's a lot of studies that show people who eat the most fruits and vegetables tend to have better health outcomes. Now, on one side of things, and that's compared to the lowest group of fruits and vegetables, and we're talking 8 cups of fruits and vegetables a day, which means these people love their fucking vegetables for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that the fruits and vegetables are what's causing their better health, but it means that if fruits and vegetables were actually poisonous and killing people or whatever, unhealthy, these people wouldn't have the best health outcomes compared to the people who eat the least fruits and vegetables, okay? And there's also a dose-dependent response where the more fruits and vegetables these people eat in these cohort studies, the greater their health outcomes become and their lowest risk of disease from all causes. So it's pretty clear that there's something that's correlated with the amount of fruits and vegetables these people are eating and their health outcomes. And the point is, with the dose-dependent response and reduction of risk for all causes of health problems and diseases, you can't really say that fruits and vegetables are necessarily poisonous. Because what you would see is, in a dose-dependent fashion, you'd see the opposite effect. You'd see that these people have increased risks of some kind of disease that would be dramatically noticeable, okay? So then on the other side of this, you have the understanding that just because plant foods seem to be correlated with positive health outcomes in the literature, it does not mean that the plant foods themselves are the cause. And you hear this from evidence-based nutrition researchers like Alan Aragon, and even people like Lane Norton, where, what you kind of understand is that most people who are purposely going out of the way to consume, these high amounts of fruits and vegetables in these studies, we're talking 8 cups a day, they have a generally healthier lifestyle, okay? They're usually exercising, they're avoiding junk food, which is even more important. They're usually calorically restricting, and usually that means a reduction of polyunsaturated omega-6 oils. And a reduction of body fat means lowering the body fat stores of omega-6 as well. Now, the omega-6 thing is kind of murky by the research, but we know in anecdotal reports, people completely remove all PUFAs from their diet, actually find they don't get sunburned anymore, and there's a resolution in a variety of mysterious health conditions, including autoimmunity. So, to me, that's interesting. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people will see the research on fruits and vegetable intake, and they'll say, well, that means that fruits and vegetables are like the panacea for good health, especially plant-based doctors. But then if you look at these people who are on these carnivore diets and they completely remove fruits and vegetables from their diet, what you find is autoimmune disease goes away, and just eating mostly meat, eggs, and maybe some cheese, people tend to lose weight without really tracking calories. they tend to gain muscle oftentimes when before they might have been, a twig. They oftentimes reverse type 2 diabetes. I've seen coronary artery calcium scores go from like 900 down to 0, some extreme like that. I've seen depression go away. For me, insomnia went away. There have been published reports of schizophrenia being put into remission that have since been retracted with no explanation as to why. You see lots of reports of that, actually. Mental health issues completely resolving. So, this idea that the gut microbiome and, fiber and polyphenols and all these things are essential parts of healing. And in functional medicine, they say for autoimmunity and mental health, you need to eat all these plants for the phytonutrients and the fiber and things that are supposed to have magic effects on your gut and your mental well-being. These people are taking all these supplements and probiotics and things that are just exclusively following the correlation studies on the gut microbiome. And then when you look at people who actually resolve their health issues, they often do so by removing those plant foods. So what am I saying with all of this whole video here? I'm saying plant foods are not poisonous, obviously, but they seem to have problems. If you just follow anecdotes, you'll be very easily persuaded into dogma that says all plants are poisonous. And if you only look at the research, you'll say all these carnivore people are lying because the research clearly shows people who eat more fruits and vegetables tend to have the lowest risks of all diseases across all studies and all populations ever studied, and this and that. And so you get kind of limiting beliefs on both sides that aren't entirely accurate, because people who just follow the research, what happens? They're like, well, if you have autoimmune disease, removing fruits and vegetables is a stupid idea and all this stuff, and it won't have an effect, a placebo and all this stuff. People, doctors will literally tell you a healthy diet for Crohn's disease is a fiber-rich plant-based diet or whatever, or for fibromyalgia or whatever. And that's going based on just looking at the evidence without taking into context people's experiences in practical clinical experience and what actually works for people with those conditions. But then when you look at these people that heal from these conditions, you might find, oh, that's not necessarily accurate. So, it's important to combine the two. So what happens when you combine practical experience with research in this example? You start to see, well, yeah, if I remove all plant foods, I have a resolution of my symptoms. But why can't I eat plant foods without triggering my symptoms? And then you can look into things like maybe glyphosate, maybe anti-nutrients and things, maybe the gut permeability and stuff like that, and gut dysbiosis, maybe side effects of antibiotic usage, maybe looking into the gut microbiome as a means of digesting plant foods rather than this fascinating thing that is controlling your health. Seems to be a middleman between the foods that you're eating and the lifestyle and your environment, and then health outcomes. It's not the cause, it's a middleman that's correlated. But yeah. And so there's a lot of other areas where this kind of comes into play. Just because a study, there's actually a study that says there's a study that says people who drink black coffee are more likely to be psychopaths. Do you really think there's a causal link between black coffee and being a psychopath? Like, if you drink your coffee black, are you going to if you go from drinking coffee with cream all your life to all of a sudden drinking your coffee black, are you really going to turn into a psychopath? There's like some kind of, causal link. That's ridiculous. Likewise, if you judge a friend by the type of coffee they drink, you're like, oh, you drink your coffee black? I can't be your friend anymore because you're a psychopath. Like, that is just abiding by research to the point where it's dysfunctional now. The whole purpose of research should be to make your life better, but people, they use it like a religion, and then it can cause some negative problems in overcoming issues. So, and there actually is a study that says that about black coffee. But anyway, just because there's a lot of research that's being repeated that says the same thing doesn't mean that the subject being studied is actually the cause. Just because research over and over again shows people that eat more fruits and vegetables or switch to a plant-based diet have lower risk of diseases, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the plant foods that do it or that's the removal of meat. The research, it serves as observations and data that is useful so that you can ask more questions and dive deeper and conduct more studies. And comparing it to real-world populations that contradict but also reinforce it, and studying those people on a personal level, I think is a great way to complement the research in ways that research just cannot show. Like, for example, it's unethical to, sleep deprive a group of humans for a period of time for the purpose of science. That's why we do rat studies now. We used to do studies like that on prisoners or mental health patients, or on soldiers in the military. But we don't do it anymore because of ethics. Or at least we don't think we do it anymore, but maybe we do, secretly. But then, let's see, what else? You can't give somebody a possible carcinogen to try to study to see if it's a carcinogen, right? We design an intervention trial or give someone a potential carcinogenic compound, and you study the effects of the carcinogen over the course of, 12 weeks. That's unethical, because if a bunch of people die of cancer or get cancer during the trial, you've directly caused cancer for the purpose of science. So the point is, it's unethical to devise studies that actually can prove causation. And even within those study designs, there's genetics and other underlying factors. But in most correlation studies, they're underpowered. They're not able to prove a high magnitude of effect, and they often don't. Most of these studies on fruits and vegetables have such a low absolute risk reduction that they're really not that relevant anyway. So there's a whole lot of problems with all of this. The effects of polyphenols have never actually been proven either. And then some of the intervention trials people use to reinforce their idea that polyphenols have these magical effects. Oftentimes, the studies, they're like, there's like a 0.5% increase in cognition over the course of 16 weeks in memory recognition, but then a significant reduction, like a 5.5% reduction in cognitive focus or something. It's like, well, how the fuck do you have such a tiny percentage increase in memory recall with a polyphenol compound, but then a 10 times decrease in focus? Maybe that's because maybe that's statistical error, or maybe it's by chance or underlying factor, right? But people don't know how to interpret p-values and percentages and these other things, so they kind of exaggerate findings and studies, and it allows people to make absolutist claims about studies that show nothing of the sort. So a lot of other examples, but I'm tired of talking about this, so hopefully this makes sense, and I'll talk to you all next time.